wrapping up our month of 8 movies, and this time we're going back to the jungle to get an ape and bring it back to civilization. What could possibly go wrong, right? So that's, of course, the story of Mighty Joe Young. I'm John Chang with Dan Edmonds.
Yeah, the mighty John Chang and the mighty Dan Edmonds here.
And so I think the thing that we've talked about before with originals versus remakes is this idea at different times that I think sometimes we seem to just really, just go back to the same ideas and then just rework it. And here in this case, Miriam Cooper, he's basically just taken the King Kong idea. And I think what's interesting is he did partially catch on to how people really were attracted to Kong more so than the heroes and stuff like that. And yeah. I think that's something that we rarely see is a filmmaker who has some kind of awareness about what was it that kind of really worked as part of the formula and everything. And so I thought that was like a interesting kind of point that just to talk about how sometimes filmmakers do catch on to what is it about a formula that works and how sometimes they don't.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and it shows you actually how savvy Cooper was, because he realized that people just went to see Kong, and kind of like the audience at the end of King Kong, Mighty Joe Young is all set around Hollywood, and it's all about the showmanship, really, about how to do that. And I think he people really just he made him the hero, so to focus the attention more on him. But you see that there's various points in film where they've realized that as well. Like between the 70s and the 80s, they realized with horror movies that the monster might actually be the star of the show, like Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's Terminator and various other things. Not so much a horror sort of slant, but you can even say it about Darth Vader as well. People, what would Star Wars be without Darth Vader? It would be a pretty, uninteresting. Well, not uninteresting, but it would lose a lot in the process. So,
right.
It's that famous saying, "Your movie's only as good as your bad guy." And I think what's interesting is this, though, he tries to kind of make the bad guy into the good guy. It's like the Phantom Menace, but 50 years before.
I think there's something to how we are attracted to the darkness and stuff, and I think different times, monsters in general are part of our fascination with kind of that side of and like you said, it's part of the movies that struggle with the hero different times is because the villain's kind of just this kind of mustache twirling thing that we've talked about different on other episodes, and they just don't lack the the gravity. They don't lack the kind of it's just not as interesting as characters. And I think if that's the case, then I think the hero, then even if no matter how interesting they are, it's kind of just it almost seems unbalanced and stuff like that. I think that's one of the things that kind of ends up happening. So
I think as well, these movies like King Kong and sort of monster movies in particular, they tap into a very kind of primal part of our nature, which is this idea of, and we've talked before about sci-fi sort of encapsulating this idea that I like to sort of build a toddler likes to build a bridge out of bricks and then just smash it down. That's the satisfying part, is destroying it at the end. And I think that's what we use movies for, is like our frustrations against the world and these constructions of society. It's quite fun to see someone just come along and just destroy it all and see what would happen. How would people react in these kind of situations? So.
And we definitely see that as we'll get into with the first Mighty Joe Young. So it's interesting that we have basically we bring back the character that Robert Armstrong. He yeah, we called him Carl Denham and King Kong and stuff like that. In this case, we call him Max O'Hara, but he's basically the same character. You know, he's the one. Yeah. He's the one that's kind of, you know, has this dream of like kind of. Well, actually, that's one thing that is different though. Like, or actually, I'm trying. Is that different or is it the same? Like, where basically he doesn't know that, like, you know, Mighty Joe Young exists. He's looking for something to kind of bring to the spotlight and stuff. So he goes on this, you know, safari, this expedition. With what's interesting is it's a bunch of cowboys, which I think signifies how John Ford was one of the co-producers originally, but then ends up dropping out and stuff.
Oh, he dropped out, did he? Right.
Yeah, apparently after production started and stuff. So, which I think, to me, what that shows also is that, like, how the cowboys ended up in the film, but then none of the way that, like, you know, when you see a John Ford movie, right, and how it's shot and stuff, you really don't see any of that in, you know, Mighty Joe Young.
Well, that's what I was going to say. It didn't remind me of any other John Ford movies, so it's kind of like we've got it written that your name can come up in the credits, but, you know, after that, it's done, right?
I can only guess that, like, you know, Cooper didn't have the vision that, you know, John Ford had, and I think they just kind of basically had a parting of creative differences and stuff. I can only imagine.
Yeah, and this was, of course, as well, one of Ray Harryhausen's early movies as well. So it's the first time we see his sort of distinctive stop motion animation style. So, yeah,
it's interesting how, you know, like he did so much of it for this movie, and then ends up, you know, winning an award. I think, you know, like, what's interesting to me about that also is that, like, he originally was just supposed to be an assistant, but I guess because of something kind of happening in the background and stuff like that, he ends up being, you know, in charge. And, you know, I can tell you from, like, in maybe from your technical work too, that, like, there's different times that, like, so something kind of happens, and then you end up being, you know, like, kind of in charge, you know, and you have to, you know, make things happen. And it's funny how it's using these technical kind of fields that kind of thing occurs a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's a similar thing that may have happened with, like, James Cameron about Beyond the Stars. You know, there's a guy who was just building a few spaceships, and then it became like, well, he's pretty much the guy who did all the effects, and then I'm guessing that must have helped him step up.
Absolutely,
in his career, definitely. I also liked at the beginning of this movie the fact that it just says Africa, but doesn't specify any particular country in Africa. It's just like, they are speaking Swahili, so we know it's somewhere kind of like on the East Coast, but yeah, we don't want to confuse people with actual geographical knowledge of Africa there. So.
And I feel like between King Kong and this one, there's a little bit more PC, like, kind of, I mean, you know, like, the natives were not as so primitive and / barbarians and stuff like that, you know.
No, they weren't dangerous. They were quite passive, but the way they're still on dodgy ground, because you kind of have this, like, toddler white girl who is kind of like outsmarting them in sort of deals, which from their perspective at the time must have been like, okay, we're going to sort of indicate just how brave and savvy this girl is. She can sort of, you know, barter with some locals, just like an adult can. But what they're really doing is they're basically just portraying the people in this African village as being outsmarted by a 4-year-old white girl. And I think what's also interesting is that, like, she's there kind of telling them what to do and going about telling them, and then kind of she's speaking to Joe in the same way. So in some respects, the film is kind of putting the native African villagers and Joe in the same basket in terms of how she deals with situations. So it's for they're kind of on, I mean, any movie about apes is always on dodgy ground. So especially set in the 1940s. So yeah, that was kind of a bit of a dodgy connection I found there. But yeah. Aside from that, it's considerably better than King Kong, I would say.
Definitely. Oh, so her dad, though, is what's called the one that we were talking before the show. That is, we'll be talking about him in Out of Towners and stuff. So I was kind of like wondering,
Okay.
So we have these this producer guy that kind of comes into town with what's called Ben Johnson, and this is apparently his first movie and stuff like that. So, it's interesting how even though, John Ford ends up dropping out of this project, but then, he ends up using Ben Johnson for future, productions and stuff like that. So that's, I think what's funny about this business, like kind of where if somebody, likes them, they'll definitely bring them on to other things. And it's probably not as common though that like where somebody who, they didn't work together and, really in this one. So I'm guessing that what happened was that Ford was like part of the, and was still around for the casting decision and still liked them at that point, or, even after the production to kind of bring him on. One other kind of note with Jill Terry Moore, this is of course one of her earliest roles, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about how like she ends up marrying Howard Hughes, who's one of the RKO producers. So that's another kind of side story we'll save for later stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I mean, I would say what was kind of interesting for me was the way they introduced Joe in this is that you kind of think he's trying to free the lion initially, and then you realize he's just kind of playing around with the lion. He's just like, oh, what's in the box? There's a lion, and he's just smashing it about and wanting to get it. But it's kind of, I guess I'm too used to modern movies where animals are portrayed as much more sort of benevolent, and actually they do that in the '98 version where he tries to sort of free other animals and save people and stuff. But that was kind of an interesting change, and he's pretty dangerous, I would say. Yeah. In this way, he seems to be throwing people around quite happily, and I'm not sure entirely people would have been able to get up and walk away from some of his.
Well, that's what's funny is that in King Kong, right? We definitely see the menace and the danger and all that. And here, like, with Mighty Joe Young, they definitely still had that, but then they seem to really work on playing up the comedy aspect. We see it throughout the movie, like, with the initial, like kind of, Jill telling, Joe to, put the guy down, like we hear that, like that's almost like, maybe like a drinking game, like how many times does he say, put the guy down?
Put the guy down, yeah. Or, yeah.
And she does that much more than screaming, like, like kind of, that's mainly what we had with Faye Ray and stuff, so.
Yeah, I mean, that is an interesting sort of switch for her character, actually. She's a reasonably sort of strong female character, I guess. Yeah. She's there kind of not only sort of telling Joe what to do, but she's also the one to kind of like, she's not afraid of challenging Max O'Hara and sort of saying, I'm not really keen on this whole show business thing. It's a bit exploitative and stuff. So that was, and she sort of finally makes the decision to get out of there. Well, no, she doesn't really, but I mean, she's not a complete sort of screaming, shrinking victim like in King Kong. Although I did like the line when they first see Joe, one of the guys says, "Did I see a gorilla and a beautiful dame?" And I just thought that was exactly the takeaway that Cooper had after King Kong became a success. He was just like, you put a gorilla and a beautiful dame together, it's going to make some money. So,
yeah, it's interesting how on the one hand he makes the female lead in this case, like you said, a stronger character. At the same time, though, and like we've talked before about how he uses Carl Denham as his kind of stand-in and stuff like that. Here we have Max O'Hara as his stand-in, right? And so on the one hand, he's exploitative, and the other though, like major spoiler, like he ends up being the one that kind of really helping like kind of Joe escape and everything. So it's almost as if that like in the first movie, like King Kong, it was such a tragedy to kind of kill the monster or something like that he learned his lessons. So here, like kind of his character is like going to make sure that he survives, and which maybe it seems like that then there's room for sequels, like kind of, which of course, what's funny about all that then though, is that like Mighty Joe Young did not really do well financially and stuff like that. And then, like they dropped, because of that, they dropped any plans for sequels. So it's funny how that like you had this great plan then, right? And you kind of even like almost built it into the story, but meanwhile it doesn't quite work out the way you had intended and stuff.
Yeah, well, I think, and this is probably a more general point about both movies, I guess, is that you're setting up this creature as a monster that's dangerous and you should be afraid of it. But let's not be too afraid, because it's also got a nice side. It's kind of like it walks a kind of a halfway line too much, I think, to you want your monsters to be real monsters in order to really get people sort of fearful and excited about the movie, I think. So, I will. No, go on. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, yeah, that's a great point though. That, like, you know, it's if you try to almost again build like a monster by committee, right? Where, like, you know, like, let's have the ideal movie monster, and, you know, like, kind of that's what you end up with. Like, kind of it's like one that's like more generic and stuff, and then, you know, which on the one hand, I think Mighty Joe Young technically, you know, because of the effects, is really. I mean, it's striking as a monster, because it seems like they really deepen the abilities, like, you know, with Ray Harryhausen's work and stuff. That, like, I think visually and technically it works and stuff. But I think as a story, then I think that's where it really struggled. Was like, because I have to admit that, like, I've seen it before, and after like the whole rampage in the nightclub scene and stuff, which is kind of like the throwing around the Legos as you described it. I think I just tuned out as a kid. Like, kind of, you know, like I was just kind of like was not really engaged, and because I totally blocked out, like, from that moment on till then finally getting back to, you know, the jungle stuff. It was kind of like just, you know, I'd totally forgotten all that part and stuff.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I tuned out as an adult most of the way through this 1949 one. I really didn't think it was like a great movie by any stretch. I was quite surprised when I saw the Rotten Tomatoes score, because I thought, yeah, this is, not one of my favorites. My favorite part, I think, of the entire movie was the parade of strongmen, where they have on the stage, cool. And they've got these line of men in very sort of weirdly tight leopard skin leotards, sort of middle-aged men performing dubious feats of strength, like sort of bending bars and pulling chains apart and stuff. And it's just such a ridiculous scene now. It's just, and their names as well, like the Swedish Angel is one of the.
They took their time naming each one.
Yeah. I thought
that
was.
And each one had his demonstration of strength and stuff.
And I also like that occasionally the crowd would react to one of them. Like there was the hairy one, and there's this the crowd goes, "What a guy!" like this, and, you know, it was just priceless. That whole scene was just brilliant.
It just felt like such a scene that you would see in that time period. Like, in other words, I don't think you could pull off a scene like that nowadays.
No, I think it's definitely a unique part of that movie experience. But also the other thing I kind of enjoyed was them getting Joe drunk in the
right.
And there was one bit, like, I was trying to when they start giving him like the bottles to drink down. And they say, "Oh, he drinks like a," and I couldn't make out the word,
right?
But it sounded like Jew. It sounded like they were saying he drinks like a Jew. I don't know if that's what they were actually saying, but obviously it was something. Maybe it was some slang from the 40s that I just didn't really hear properly.
Right.
I had to rewind that 3 times, and I just couldn't quite make out what they were trying
I missed that part. Yeah.
So, it's weird, but yeah. And it's also not really revealed what he does to Joe's hand, you know, because there's a bit where he's scolding Joe for stealing all of the drink. Then you just sort of see his hand. It's weird.
Weird, Yeah, I think just different times. There were kind of moments that were very much like kind of like, you know, like made you kind of shrug and go, what was that about and stuff.
Yeah.
And they get to the orphanage, right, and stuff where there's this fire going on and everything, and you know, like kind of, you know, I think that was like a major save the cat moment, which as we're getting into the remake, they kind of reproduce in a, you know, their way and stuff. I think what I feel the other thing that like is a idea in this is how, I don't know if it was a statement of Hollywood or celebrities or But what we kind of really see is like the crowd initially, like kind of, they love him and stuff like that. But then over time, as different showings kind of happen, they start having kind of, the entertainment's at Joe's expense and stuff. And so
Yes.
Jill is trying to protect him and everything. So it's interesting how, and maybe some of the other movies that like we talk about, the female being exploited and stuff like that. But, here, like, we're kind of, here's this creature that like, is the one that's being exploited. And I don't know, I don't really see it as like a thing about, animals, in movies being exploited. And I don't see it as that. But it's still just it's an interesting idea, though.
I mean, I think you're right. I think there's a sort of a deeper layer of how this is either about the industry or it's about particular people in the industry. It's like you can kind of see the same. You can look at like a movie like Star is Born and look at the guy from that. You can almost replace Joe with him and look at it's the same kind of story, right? Someone who's famous and can't deal with the fame and or the trappings of it. Literally trappings in this because it's a cage.
Yeah.
But it's not like a million miles away.
And you couldn't get more cool.
I hope that comment doesn't come back to bite me on the ass at some point, like comparing Star is Born to Mighty Joe Young. But yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is though, like you couldn't get more cruel than like how like initially like kind of the demonstrating his strength and stuff like that. But then by the time that like things started really getting derailed, they put him like as a monkey, like or they make Mighty Joe Young look like a monkey, like with the hurdy-gurdy and stuff like that, where Jill is like kind of the ones, kind of doing the cranking the music and stuff like that. And he's supposed to be catching like kind of the coins that the audience is tossing at him. And he just looks ridiculous, but I think it's like just basically, I mean, it's like almost in a way that like, besides kind of being at his expense and stuff, it's, it's probably as exploitative as you can get. And so I feel like that's definitely, is a statement about, how like entertainers like kind of, initially start off, being admired for their talents and their feats of, like kind of, their strengths, if you will. But then by a certain point, they become like, parodies or self-mockeries of, themselves.
Well, I think this is also a journey that you see with a star in or celebrities is that they start off doing something that's fairly credible. And yet if they can't get the roles or they end up doing more and more things where they kind of have to make a fool of themselves more and more, or they're doing stuff where they're being more exploited over time. And it's kind of, in order to keep the money rolling in, there's that kind of downward spiral you see with some celebrities. And the interesting thing about that as a statement on kind of perhaps the system in Hollywood is that there is a similar kind of mechanism that goes into cults in order to, when you join a cult, what tends to happen is they tend to make you do more and more humiliating things or make you reveal more about your personal self. So actually you're more kind of emotionally embedded in that society. And it's funny in that there's a similar sort of coercive thing in Hollywood, I think, as well, perhaps, or in show business maybe.
Yeah, it's certainly has that expression of drinking the Kool-Aid and like where there's people like I mean we talked before about the conspiracy thing and stuff like that, and some conspiracy theorists will talk about how like like such star is part of the the plan to like basically not only just exploit them, but like, that they, like were seduced, like kind of to be part of this, machine that, like kind of helps to exploit even more people and stuff like that. And, on and on. And so we don't need to go too much into conspiracy theories and stuff, but it's interesting how like, they, these people have caught on to that and they use it as one of their, their theories and stuff.
Yeah, I think actually the truth is probably far more banal than that. It's just that they either needed to pay some bills, they had a contractual obligation with the studio, or they just got persuaded and were, easily led down the wrong path or something like that,
Yeah, it's that thing of, I'm sure for every, like, Harvey Weinstein kind of case and stuff like that we've heard about in recently, I think there's plenty of the other stars and celebrities you know, and there's really no point to bring up their names and stuff like that, who basically they climbed up because of, you know, like kind of the stuff that, you know, they went through with them, but we just don't hear about. You know, I think that, like, in other words, for everyone that's like been brought to light, there's probably plenty that like we'll never know of and stuff.
I'm sure, yeah. Yes. See,
Well,
I guess, yeah, I've been seeing it, talking of being brought to light. I guess this is perhaps a good opportunity to go into one of Charlize Theron's earliest roles, which is Mighty Joe remake of 1998.
So it's interesting how Disney kind of took over this production, right? And in even the opening credits, you see the, you know, famous RKO tower and stuff like that. And we definitely see, like, you know, the Disney touch on things, you know, because right away we have this kind of theme of, you know, ecological, you know, and wildlife preservation and stuff. And, you know, I don't know about like your experience, but like I definitely remember how on a Sunday night you'd have like the Disney, you know, kind of movie slash, you know, special, stuff like that. And then side by side would be like, I forget his name, but I think it was like Marlon. I will have to look at the name and stuff like that, but it was a Mutual Omaha Nature Special that, like, you know, like, so in other words, I have no doubt that like there was basically, it wasn't by coincidence that, like, you know, they had those shows side by side and stuff.
Well, we certainly didn't have the Disney Hour on a Sunday evening in England.
Oh, okay.
We had a much cheaper version, which was probably like, you know, we either had David, well, not that David Attenborough is cheap. You either had David Attenborough doing sort of serious adult nature stuff, or you had sort of some people in the studio when they brought an elephant in and say, hey kids, look at this elephant and stuff like this, and did some, or you had oh man, I can't remember his name now. One of my favorites, Animal Magic, was this show where someone did the voiceovers. They just had clips. It was such a cheap show. They had clips of animals and he pretended to do the voices of the animals talking to each other.
I see.
Johnny Morris was the guy. Yeah, classic 70s English children's TV there. But yeah, Disney was kind of like, occasionally they showed it, but not too often. So yeah, I guess in this one you've got, well, the difference is, I suppose, yeah, it's got a very, you know, hunting animals is bad, poachers are bad, hunting people is also bad, don't kill people, don't kill animals is kind of the message of this one. But I guess as well, there's also more awareness of endangerment, you know, of animal extinction and endangerment stuff. So that's obviously the point they raise in this one.
Yeah. And we definitely see, like, kind of Charlize Theron, you know, like her bond with Joe is like kind of pretty clear from the beginning, because you know, both of them become orphans in the same night and stuff.
Yeah, it's quite an effective dramatic moment. That actually, I was quite impressed. I like the fact that it was a very simple moment, but it had her and her mother and singing. And then you just heard the mother's voice fading out as this camera pan to the moon. You realize, oh yeah, okay, mother's dead. Thought that was really very effectively done. And it's a much more kind of it feels very much more Disney-esque in that respect, because they love to kill off parents, obviously, in any Disney movies. Right.
That's definitely another kind of key thing we see, like, you know, whether it's Bambi or, you know, on and on, like kind of. And it's interesting how, like, they plug in the flashlight reference, you know, early on stuff, and, you know, major spoiler kind of coming up and stuff, and then it becomes significant, you know, like, you know, towards the end. I thought that was like something that was cleverly done, that like they didn't bring too much attention to it, and then it kind of, you know, so overall, like, you know, as we're kind of progressing, I feel like that there's just a lot of nice touches that they kind of just really, you know, kind of, on the one hand, you know, we know we're watching a Disney movie, but the other, like, they just kind of like, it's its own kind of piece from the original and stuff. It's like, even though it's a remake and there's a lot of things that kind of builds on the original Joe and stuff, they you know, as we kind of talked about as the earlier part of this discussion, they really, I think, honed in on what kind of we're taking, and then just, you know, like kind of, and then just basically put in plenty of their own elements and stuff.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Even though it's a remake and there's a lot of things that kind of builds on the original Joe stuff, they you know, as we kind of talk about as the earlier part of this discussion, they really, I think, honed in on what kind of we're taking, and then just and then just basically put in plenty of their own elements and stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean, it had a very kind of Disney-ish sort of feel to it. I mean, the effects are obviously much better. They used a large, was it like a 15-foot animatronic gorilla for this? And it's actually pretty well done. I was considering how many ape movies we've watched recently. It was definitely in the top tier of ape effects. And I mean, I'm just guessing that Rick Baker had something to do with it.
He did, yeah.
Of course, yeah. And the other thing, this is like a real small thing from my perspective, but this is just a key of like how Disneyfied their version of Africa is, right? It's like she's tucking her daughter in bed at night, and it's this beautiful sort of tranquil vista of the sort of Africa at night with all these candles everywhere. And I'm just like, there is no way anywhere near where gorillas live in Africa where you wouldn't be sleeping with a huge mosquito net, especially around a child. It was like, unless all of those candles are just spewing anti-mosquito stuff in them, and that's the only way you would be sleeping like that. But it looked very pretty at the time. So.
Definitely. And then here we have the villain, which it's interesting as well that like they bring on a strong villain in this case, Rade Šerbedžija. I have to apologize for hacking his name and stuff like that. He's a poacher, and then kind of poaching is like kind of such a big thing here, which it's kind of funny, like kind of in the original Mighty Joe Young, we really like if there's any kind of actual villain, it's really Max O'Hara in the sense that like he's like one that kind of is keeping them there, and it's really like him and his greed, like kind of being like what's really the main obstacle, right, of keeping Joe and Jill from getting back to like kind of Africa and stuff like that. But here in this case, we have this poacher who like not only kills the mother, but then it's like is bent on destroying Joe as well, and in a very like almost cartoonish way. Like, so it's funny on one hand that he is like kind of interesting as a villain, but on the other it's kind of he ends up quickly as this kind of cliche.
Yeah, he's kind of a cartoon sort of villain, isn't he, really? But yeah, I don't think I kind of like the fact that his finger and thumb were missing, and just sort of that was
and his
it was just
trigger
such
finger
a
too.
yeah. I mean that's kind of a symbolic sort of thing there of like Joe took away his ability to hunt. I guess is one way of looking at it. So.
Here we have Bill Paxton, which we haven't talked about in what's called past episodes yet and stuff. But he's actually an actor that like I feel like we kind of grew up with him because of like his role in Aliens, and then over time like he just has done some really interesting work and stuff. So here like he's playing the kind of crazy American who's on the one hand at first seems like another hunter / poacher and stuff, but then he turns out to be this kind of benign, savior, I guess, if you will, for helping to kind of bring Joe, like kind of to a safer place from the, the clutches of the poachers of Africa and stuff like that. But on the other, it ends up being like kind of this, I don't know, this double kind of role, because he's also the one that kind of creates the problem of where then Joe's like trapped in now this kind of golden cage, which I want to kind of mention though that like it's interesting how like they don't really mention what exactly was this kind of preserve that like is kind of like a semi-zoo stuff, but it really closely resembles like the San Diego, what they used to call the Wild Safari Park and stuff, where their slogan was like how people are the ones in the cages and stuff. And so what you do is like ride around in these, trucks or these vehicles and stuff like that you can see like kind of the lions and, the various animals running freely. And that was actually really, like a great I mean, it's well worth the price of admission just to kind of have that kind of safari experience in this kind of environment and everything. So
yeah, no, I thought it was quite an interesting idea that he's absolutely desperate to bring Joe to his reserve in LA, and you do kind of, yeah, I mean, I suppose it's weird that he's so driven to do that, because it doesn't, you don't really get the impression, unlike Max O'Hara, who has a financial incentive, there isn't really, I suppose it's more kind of, it's supposed to be a scientific incentive for Bill Paxton's character. That seems to be how they portray it, because he's talking about, the genetic blah, 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 and the blood type, I must get a blood sample.
But I'm thinking that he's paid a bounty. That's something, like, because he's able to afford a lot of equipment and his expenses to kind of get there and all that. And so they never say it out loud, but I'm guessing though that it's almost like they downplayed it because they don't want to make him seem like kind of, that's his motivation and stuff like that. But my guess is that there's probably people that are similar to him that on one hand they are scientists and kind of naturalists or whatever, but he's almost like a Indiana Jones, right? Where he's paid some kind of reward to kind of sweeten the deal and stuff.
Yeah, and it's an odd role for. I mean, they've obviously tried to sort of give Bill Paxton like a leading man role pretty much in this one, which is probably why they downplayed that so much, because I didn't pick up on that at all. And it's funny. I mean, I really like Bill Paxton as an actor. I think you're right. He's very underutilized, I would say, in Hollywood. And some people do give him some interesting roles, because I just think he's a really interesting actor. But he doesn't quite really work as a leading man in this, I don't think. But it's nice to see him nonetheless. The reason you can tell he's portrayed as the leading man is because they spent a lot of time on his hair. I don't think I've seen Bill Paxton's hair looking as good as it does in this. So. Yeah, that was pretty obvious. But it's it's a very sort of similar general themes of King Kong as well. And you've got like this sort of, it's basically, a force of nature that's been taken to society and sort of let loose. And the only difference this time is kind of being taken by his own, not against his will this time, whereas it was against his will in King Kong. So, yeah, that's kind of I guess a general connection. But again, it's most of the appeal of this movie, I think, is just waiting for him to cause chaos. Like at the dinner party, it's this kind of thing. They're just tapping into sort of kids' frustrations with things like, whenever parents have their dinner party, the kids are probably sent to play in the other room, and it's like, Joe's in there smashing up the dinner party. Which I kind of enjoyed. It was always quite comedic, that scene. And then the other thing, you can tell it's very much a Disney movie, and how they're really desperately trying to kind of like balance how scary Joe is to not make him too scary, because when he's sort of running amok in the city, you've got all these shots of kids going, cool, and oh man, that's amazing, he did this. And it's kind of almost, they're really saying, oh, look how fun it is that he's destroying that car, and and the parents are all very worried, and pushing their kids away and trying to get them to safety, and the kids are going, hey, cool, let's go. And so that was very obviously like Disney trying to kind of make sure they get the kids buy-in during the movie.
So a couple cameos I did want to mention though. Ray Harryhausen was actually one of the guests at the party and stuff, and so Terry Moore, who was the original Joe, was the one that kind of like makes his comment about, she reminds me of somebody, but I can't think of who and stuff. Like when she's like, when we see Charlize Theron walking in this kind of, amazing, dress and stuff like that. And so Ray Harryhausen is apparently her husband, and that goes, when we first met, kind of. That's right. So that was a kind of interesting little tidbit there. Here also we have Naveen Andrews way back when with the hunt and stuff, who's as this hustler. So it's interesting how we'll see him again, of course, in Rollerball, and again kind of hustling and stuff. And one last kind of cameo that's worth mentioning is which kind of we had no idea, of course, in 1998 that it would be her future kind of thing. Besides, kind of like the Big Bang Theory, which she's kind of known as the kind of the strict HR director and stuff like that. Regina King is going to end up being the star of like a future discussion we'll have about the Watchmen series and stuff. So
Right.
so it's funny how like you just don't even see you see a little bit of her wry kind of humor and stuff like that, and I feel like that's one of the kind of clues of like kind of the greatness, I guess, that awaits her. But it's interesting, I think, that there's probably no signs at this point that like she would end up being the star of a series and stuff. So
and I think, well, I mean, overall, I think Charlize Theron, for one of her early roles, does a good job of carrying this movie. She injects enough sort of humanity into all the scenes to make them pretty effective. She looks great, it's been, she looks pretty stunning. I think one of the most interesting things for me, though, is that you have a South African actor playing a character who spent their whole life growing up in South Africa, but has an American accent for some reason. Right. It's like I don't know why they didn't just. I mean, I know why they didn't do it, but it just seems like you couldn't have just given her have a normal accent for that. So but I mean, she seems to do. I mean, I'm not American, so I can't say how good it is, but I can't say that I ever listen to her and think, oh, that's a really bad American accent. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but
I think it's, to me, what's interesting is how like you're really starting to see her, like kind of cutting her acting chops and stuff. Like up to now, she's had relatively minor roles. I think this is like one of her first major roles. Like she was the wife in the Devil's Advocate and stuff like that.
That's right. Devil's Advocate was the only one before this, I think, of note.
Yeah, but nothing like kind of really like kind of noteworthy. And I think now Hollywood's starting to kind of catch on that, like, hey, there's something besides her looks and everything. And I think that's one of the things that she's always kind of, I don't know, struggled, but like that, like people probably only have over time giving her more credit for her acting and stuff, and like where she's really just kind of like been kind of like taken seriously. But I think like I think a lot of actors in general, probably not even necessarily female ones, they probably have this like duality. On one hand, they got to be attractive, but the other is like, oh, if you're really attractive, then you can't have really any substance and stuff. And I think that's why like she ends up in the future, kind of major kind of spoiler, and is that she ends up in the movie Monster, where she's like basically just strips away her makeup and like just totally has this kind of like very for that matter, just like the name of the movie, she's really looks like kind of like almost like a monster of herself and stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I think she kind of preceded all of these kind of, the whole Instagram meme of "this is me without my makeup on," kind of the female celebrities did. I think she kind of tapped into that many years before, and made it part of her career almost. I mean, it's a good performance, so I don't want to detract from that, but yeah, I mean, she is, given the Disney gloss and production values, she just looks really, really super pretty in this. It's almost like she's almost too pretty in a way.
They really seem to play that up.
yeah. So that was, but I mean, I think it's good. She really shows some good sort of strength in various scenes where she's sort of like has to sort of be quite combative with the various sort of people and things. It doesn't really seem like it would be terribly realistic that she would end up with Bill Paxton, but I guess you got to tie it all together somehow.
Well, I mean, that's like I think that's more not necessarily even a Disney thing, but it's probably one of those tropes, right? That the awkward, like kind of goofy dude ends up with the gorgeous, kind of gal.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's probably like baked into like so much of like the cinema in the past at least 10, 20 years, and where I think part of that is like what sells tickets and stuff like that, and well,
I would say as a fairly goofy dude, thanks very much Hollywood for supporting my cause there.
And I think it also like it does provide kind of some humor, I guess, too, like where there's like kind of the line that she kind of, like basically is like telling him about, oh, you have to like kind of have this spider bite you, and so it kind of makes it even look more ridiculous that like, a guy would kind of go to any length, right, to end up with a gorgeous gal and stuff. So.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I think one of my other favorite line was right at the end when he's saved the kid from the Ferris wheel of doom, and Bill Paxton's line, "You big palooka, that's not how you ride a Ferris wheel." I thought that was a great moment.
Yes. Yeah. So I did want to kind of mention that. So like the flashlight, of course, was like kind of how they realized that that's where Joe's headed, because there was like the spotlight, by the Ferris wheel and stuff like that. So, I think that was like kind of one kind of way that they really kind of tie things well together, with like a literal kind of beacon of like of hope, I guess, and stuff. And
I think as well, it kind of helps the whole Disney message as well. It's like at an amusement park, it underscores this for kids as just a ride, kids. Don't be scared of the. Like, I don't know, my daughter's fairly resilient, but we tried sort of watching bits of it, and she was just like, nah, this is too violent, which I thought was an interesting response. So she's obviously got tired of that already. So, and I think it was also, I guess what was interesting in this one compared to King Kong was that in King Kong you have him climbing up what I guess would be the symbols of corporate financial power, Whereas in this, he's like traipsing all over the Hollywood sign.
Right.
He's destroying the Chinese theater. So it seems it's kind of sort of very much attacking the established symbols of
Hollywood.
LA and Hollywood. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the other part that was striking between like kind of, Mighty Joe Young in this was that we like kind of they had the chase and stuff like that. And it did see, I don't know, like in both cases, right, again, major spoiler, they did have the moment where like, you thought that Joe was dead. And, in this one, I thought that they did I almost felt like Disney might go there. Like, I don't know what your reaction was. I felt like that they were more willing to kind of, do that almost to kind of make a point than the original and stuff.
Yeah, Disney's not definitely shy about killing off characters that we love. They do like to do that. I would say it's funny in terms of, we were talking earlier about what they do with the parents. It seems like in the movies they kill the parents, and in the TV shows they make fun of the parents. It's like either way, the parents are doomed in Disney. So, but it's God, Bambi's mother burning in the forest. They're not afraid of that kind of stuff. So.
No.
Yeah.
So I think the for me anyways, that like if that was the intent to kind of like kind of make you guess and stuff like that. I felt that part of it too, of course, was acting by Charlize Theron and stuff. But I think the overall like kind of just how things went, the kind of like where it seemed like everything was going to work out fine, but then like all this kind of disaster happened stuff. That like I feel like they, for some reason, like in this version they just really felt more willing to go there. Like it just had that kind of that feel that like like they might just actually kill off Joe, and so I felt like, oh crap, like I was almost thought that was going to be the ending at that point and stuff.
Yeah, I can't say that I cared enormously though. It's not really a great movie, Mighty Joe Young, either this or the original. So it's kind of a serviceable kind of thing.
Right.
I can't say it held my interest a huge amount. But it was, I think for me, actually, the most interesting thing about this was just seeing what those actors were doing at that point in time and what happened, what they went on to do later on. But yeah, no, I think what's surprising as well is why the effects seemed, of all the ones we've seen from 1933 to 2017, the monkey effects in this were pretty decent. They were some better than some of the ones that came 20 years afterwards. And that was kind of a little surprising for me. But I guess also what's kind of surprising for me is that there isn't like some opportunity to meet Mighty Joe Young in Animal Kingdom. Like they haven't just
Right.
surely they could have just taken that animatronic, just planted it in Animal
Right.
Kingdom, and just say, hey, come along and look at this.
Well, I think it has to do with like kind of box office because they like kind of lost money on this movie. So I think and that's what's interesting as well because like it is like you said serviceable, and so to me it wasn't a like a stinky bomb by any means.
No, it's not terrible.
But the other hand though, I think because of just financially how it did, that then they just like basically just didn't want anything to do with it stuff. I think that's the thing about Disney is like, if you don't, do well at the box office, then it's like, no toys, no rides, so you are like, like kind of just this black sheep of, like pile of like lesser Disney, kind of work, I guess.
Yeah. It's this movie is not good enough to be good, and it's not bad enough to be interesting, is how I would classify it.
Okay.
It's very, very middle of the road experience watching it. It's not offensive in any way though, really, I would say.
I was going to say too that, like I think overall, like the scenes of Africa, really do seem like kind of there was at least some kind of consulting that was kind of hired, and that was more than we see.
The Africans have lines and they deliver them to other people and in sort of fairly fluent language. They're actual real people. Imagine that. Well, it's probably, in fact, in that respect, of all the movies we've watched. No, that's not true. Some of the Planet of the Apes had proper roles. So definitely a rarity there in the ones we've watched recently. But.
Alrighty. So coming up, so we're going to be talking, of course, like in future episodes. Watchmen is like one of the ones that looking forward to kind of discussing. We will kind of visit the Willy Wonka idea with Snowpiercer. So one of the things we kind of mentioned when we discussed Charlie Chocolate Factory was this kind of weird connection that's like on the into tubes and stuff. So it'll be interesting kind of see what is the connection there, if any. And then possibly, down the road, we will kind of look at Paul Verhoeven, and he's been largely panned for Showgirls. We're going to kind of see if there's really argument for whether like Showgirls is actually a hidden gem that most folks are ignoring and stuff. And so we'll look at some of other Paul Verhoeven's work in movies that had originals and were remade.
Yeah, I think picking up on the satirical elements of his movies is something that I'm really interested in looking into. I never, when I watched Basic Instinct the first time, I didn't really think that might be a comedy. And so that's a very interesting angle for me to rewatch those. So
definitely. So once again, I'm John Chang with the Dan Edmonds, and we will see you next time.